Hello there, thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story. The War of the Worlds by hgwells, Book 2, Chapter 7, The Man on Putney Hill. I spent the night in the inn that stands on the top of Putney Hill, sleeping in a made bed for the first time since my flight to Leatherhead. I will not tell you the needless trouble I had breaking into the house. Afterwards, I found the front door was on the latch, nor how I ransacked every room for food until, just on the verge of despair, in what seemed to me to be the servant's bedroom, I found a rat new crust and 2 tins of pineapple. The place had been already searched and emptied. In the bar, I afterwards found some biscuits and sandwiches that had been overlooked. The latter I could not eat, for they were too rotten, but the former not only stayed my hunger, but filled my pockets. I lit no lamps, fearing some Martians might come beating that part of London for food in the night. Before I went to bed, I had an interval of restfulness and crawled from window to window, peering out for some sign of these monsters. I slept little. As I lay in the bed, I found myself thinking consecutively. I think I do not remember to have done since my last argument with the curate. During all the intervening time, my mental condition have been a hurrying succession of vague emotional states, or a sort of stupid receptivity. But in the night, my brain, reinforced, I suppose, by the food I had eaten, grew clear again, and I thought. 3 things struggled for possession in my mind: the killing of the curate, the whereabouts of the Martians, and the possible fate of my wife. The former gave me no sensation of horror or remorse to recall. I saw it simply as a thing done, a memory infinitely disagreeable, but quite without the quality of remorse. I saw myself then, as I see myself now, driven step by step towards that hastily blow, the creature of a sequence of accidents leading inevitably to death. I felt no condemnation, yet the memory, static and progressive, haunted me in the silence of the night, with the sense of nearness of God that sometimes comes into the stillness. In the darkness, I stood my trial, my only trial, for that moment of wrath and fear. I retraced every step of our conversation from the moment I had found him crouching beside me, heedless of my thirst and pointing to the fire and smoke that steamed up from the ruins of Weybridge. We had been incapable of cooperation. Grim chance had taken no heed of that. Had I foreseen, I should have left him in the Halliford, but I did not foresee, and crime is to foresee and do. And I set this down as I have set all this story down, as it was. There were no witnesses. All these things I might have concealed, but I set it down, and the reader must form his judgment as he will. And when, by an effort, I had set aside that picture of a prostrate body, I faced the problem of the Martians and the fate of my wife. For the former, I could imagine 100 things, and so, unhappily, I could for the latter. And suddenly, the night became terrible. I found myself sitting upon the bed, staring at the dark. I found myself praying that the heat ray might have suddenly and painlessly struck her out of being. Since the night of my return from Leatherhead, I had not prayed. I had uttered prayers, fetish prayers, had prayed as heathens mutter charm when I was in extremity. But now I prayed indeed, plead steadfastly and sanely, face to face with the darkness of God. Strange night, strangest in this, that so soon as dawn had come, I, who had talked with God, crept out of the house like a rat, leaving its hidden place, a creature scarcely larger, an inferior animal, a thing that for any passing hymn of our masters might be hunted and killed. Perhaps they also prayed confidently to God. Surely, if we had learned nothing else, this war has taught us pity. Pity for those witless souls that suffer our domain. The morning was bright and fine, and the eastern sky glowed pink and was fretted with little golden clouds. In the road that runs from the top of Putney Hill to Wimbledon was a number of poor vestiges of the panicked torrent that must have poured Londonwards on the Sunday night after the fighting began. There was a little two-wheeled cart inscribed with the name of Thomas Lobb, greengrocer, New Meldon, with a smashed wheel and abandoned tin truck. There was a straw hat tumbled into now hardened mud, and at the top of the west hill a lot of blood-stained glass about the overturned water trough. My movements were languid, my plans of the vaguest. I had no idea of going to Leatherhead, though I knew that there I had the poorest chance of finding my wife. Certainly, unless death had overtaken them suddenly, my cousins and she would have fled thence, but it seemed to me I might find or learn there whither the Surrey people had fled. I knew I wanted to find my wife, that my heart ached for her and the world of men, but I had no clear idea how the finding might be done. I was also sharply aware now of my intense loneliness. From the corner I went, under cover of the thicket of the trees and bushes, to the edge of the Wimbledon Common, stretching wide and far. That dark expanse was lit in patches by yellow gorse and broom. There was no red wheat to be seen, and as I prowled, hesitating, on the verge of the open, the sun rose, flooding it all with light and vitality. I came upon a busy swarm of little frogs in a swampy place among the trees. I stopped to look at them, drawing a lesson from their stout resolve to live, and presently, turning suddenly, with the odd feeling of being watched, I beheld something crouching amid a clump of bushes. I stood regarding this. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a man armed with cutlass. I approached him slowly. He stood silent and motionless, regarding me. As I drew nearer, I perceived he was dressed in clothes as dusty and filthy as my own. He looked, indeed, as though he had been dragged through the covert. Nearer, I distinguished the green slime of ditches, mixing with the pale drab of dried clay and shiny, coily patches. His black hair fell over his eyes, and his face was dark and dirty and sunken, so that at first I did not recognize him. There was a red cut across the lower part of his face. "Stop," he said, when I was within 10 yards of him, and I stopped. His voice was hoarse. "Where do you come from?" he said. I told, surveying him. "I come from Mortlake," I said. "I was buried near the pit the Martians made about their cylinder. I have worked my way out and escaped." "There is no food about here," he said. "This is my country. All this hill down the river and back to Clapham and up the edge of the common. There is only food for me. Which way are you going?" I answered slowly. "I don't know," I said. "I have been buried in the ruins of a house 13 or 14 days. I don't know what has happened." He looked at me doubtfully, then started, and looked with a changed expression. "I have no wish to stop about here," I said. "I think I shall go to Leatherhead, for my wife was there." He shouted out a pointing figure. "It is you," he said, "the man from Woking, and you weren't killed at Weybridge?" I recognized him at the same moment. "You are the artilleryman who came into my garden?" "Good luck," he said. "We are lucky ones. Fancy you." He put out a hand, and I looked at it. "I crawled up in a drain," he said, "but they didn't kill everyone. And after they went away, I got off towards Walton across the fields. But it is not 16 days altogether, and your hair is grey. He looked over his shoulder suddenly. Only a rook, he said. One gets to know that birds have shadows these days. This is a bit open. Let us crawl under these bushes and talk. Have you seen any Martians? I said. They have gone away across London, he said. I guess they have got a bigger camp there, Hampstead away. The sky is alive with their lights. It is like a great city, and in the glare you can just see them moving, but daylight you can't. But nearer, I haven't seen them. He counted on his fingers. 5 days. Then I saw a couple across Hammersmith, carrying something big. And the night before last, he stopped and spoke impressively. It was just a matter of lights, but it was something up in the air. I believe they have built a flying machine and are learning to fly. I stopped on hands and knees, for we had come to the bushes. Fly? Yes, he said. Fly. I went on into a little bower and sat down. It is all over with humanity, I said. If they can do that, they will simply go around the world. He nodded. They will, but it will relieve things over here a bit. And besides, he looked at me. Aren't you satisfied it is up with humanity? I am. We are down. We are beat. I stared. Strange as it might seem, I had not arrived at this fact, a fact perfectly obvious so soon as he spoke. I had still held a vague hope. Rather, I had kept a lifelong habit of mind. He repeated his words. We are beat. They carried absolute conviction. It is all over, he said. They have lost one, just one, and they have made their footing good and crippled the greatest power in the world. They have walked over us. The death of that one at Weybridge was an accident, and these are only pioneers. They kept on coming. These green stars I have seen none these 5 or 6 days, but I have no doubt they are falling somewhere every night. Nothing is to be done. We're beat. I made him no answer. I sat staring before me, trying in vain to devise some countervailing thought. This isn't a war, said the artilleryman. Never was a war, any more than there was a war between men and ants. Suddenly I recalled the night in the observatory. After the 10th shot, they fired no more, at least until the first cylinder came. How do you know? Said the artilleryman. I explained. He thought, something wrong with the gun? He said. But what if there is? They will get it ready again. And even if there is a delay, how can it alter the end? It is just men and ants. There is the ants build their cities, live their lives, have wars, revolutions, until the men want them out of the way, and then they get out of the way. That's what we are now, just ants, only ants. Yes, I said, we are eatable ants. We sat looking at each other. And what will they do with us? I said. That is what I have been thinking, he said. After Weybridge, I went south thinking. I saw what was up. Most of the people were hard at it, squealing and exciting themselves. But I'm not so fond of squealing. I have been inside of that once or twice. I'm not an ornamental soldier. And at best and worst, that is just that. And it is the man that keeps on thinking comes true. I saw everyone tracking away south. Says I, food won't last this way. And I turned right back. I went for the Martians, like a sparrow goes for men, all around. He waved a hand to the horizon. They are starving in heaps, boating, treading on each other. He saw my face and halted awkwardly. No doubt, lots of who had money have gone away to France, he said. He seemed to hesitate whether to apologize, met my eyes, and went on. There is food all about here, canned things in shops, wines, spirits, mineral waters, and the water mains and drains are empty. Well, I was telling you what I was thinking. Here's the intelligent things, I said, and it seems they want us for food. First, they will smash up ships, machines, guns, cities, all the order and organization. All that will go. If we were the size of ants, we might pull through, but we are not. It is all too bulky to stop. That the first is certain, eh? I assented. It is. I have thought it out. Very well then. Next, at present, we are caught as we are wanted. A Martian has only to go a few miles to get a crowd on the run, and I saw one day out by Wandsworth, picking houses to pieces and rooting among the wreckage. But they won't keep on doing that. So soon as they have settled all our guns and ships and smashed our railways and done all the things they are doing over there, they will begin catching us systematic, picking the best and storing us in cages and things. That is what they will start doing in a bit. Lord, they haven't begun on us yet. Don't you see that? Not begun? I exclaimed. Not begun. All that's happened so far is through our not having the sense to keep quiet, warring them with guns and such foolery, and losing our heads and rushing off in crowds to where there wasn't any more safety than where we are. They don't want to bother us yet. They're making their things, making all the things they could bring with them, getting ready for the rest of their people. Very likely that's what the cylinder has stopped for a bit, for a fear of hitting those who are here. And instead of our rushing about blind on the host or getting dynamic on the chance of busting them up, we have got to fix ourselves up according to the new state of affairs. That is how I figure it out. It isn't quite according to what a man wants for his species, but it is about what the facts point to, and that is the principle I acted upon. Cities, nations, civilization, progress, it is all over. That game is up, we are beaten. But if that is so, what is there to live for? The artilleryman looked at me for a moment. There won't to be more blessed concerts for 1,000,000 years or so. There won't be any Royal Academy of Arts. There are no nice little feats at the restaurants. If it is amusement you are after, I reckon the game is up. If you have gotten any drawing room manners or dislike to eat peas with knife or dropping H's, you're better chuck them away. They ain't no further use. I mean that men like me are going to live for the sake of breed, I tell you. I'm grim set on living, and if I'm not mistaken, you will show what insides you have gotten to before long. We are not going to be exterminated, and I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like a thundering ox. Ugh, fancy those brown creepers. You don't mean to say... I do. I'm going on under their feet. I have got it planned. I have thought it out. We men are beat. We don't know enough. We have got to learn before we got a chance. And we have got to live and keep independent while we learn. See, that is what has to be done. I stared astonished and stirred profoundly by the man's resolution. Great God, I cried, but you are a man indeed. And suddenly I gripped his hand. Huh? He said with his eye shining. I have thought it out, huh? Go on, I said. Well, this mean to escape their catching. I'm getting ready. Mind you, it isn't all of us that are made for wild beasts, and that is what it is got to be. That's why I watched you. I had my doubts. You are slender. I didn't know that it was you see, or just how you have been buried. All these, the sorts of people that lived in these houses, and all these dumb little clerks that used to live down that way, they'd be no good. They don't have any spirit in them, no proud dreams, and no proud lusts. And a man who hasn't one or the other, Lord, what is he but funk and precautions? They just use the schedule off to work. I have seen hundreds of them, but of breakfast in hand, running wild and shining to catch their little season ticket trains, for fear they had got dismissed if they didn't, working at businesses they were afraid to take, to trouble to understand, scheduling back for fear they wouldn't be in time for dinner, keeping indoors after dinner for fear of the back streets, and sleeping with the wives they married, not because they wanted them, but because they had a bit of money that would make for safety in their one little miserable schedule through the world. Lives insured and a bit invested for a fear of accidents, and on Sundays fear of the hereafter, as if hell was built for rabbits. Well, the Martian will just be godsend to these. Nice roomy cages, fattening food, careful breeding, no worries. After a week or so, chasing about the fields and lands on empty stomachs, they will come and be called cheerful. They will be quite glad after a bit. They will wonder what people did before there were Martians to take care of them, and the bar roofers and mashers and singers. I can imagine them, he said with a sort of somber gratification. There will be any amount of sentiment and religion loose among them. There is hundreds of things I saw with my eyes that I have only begun to see clearly these last few days. There is lots will take things as they are, fat and stupid, and lots will be worried by a sort of feeling that it is all wrong and that they ought to be doing something. Now, whenever things are so that, a lot of people feel they ought to be doing something. The weak and those who go weak with lot of complicated things always make for a sort of do-nothing religion, very pious and superior, and submit the persecution and the will of the Lord. Very likely you have seen the same thing. It is energy in a gale of funk and turned clean inside out. These cages will be full of psalms and hymns and piety, and those of a less simple sort will work in a bit of, erotism. He paused. Very likely this Martian will make pets of some of them, train them to do tricks, who knows, get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed, and some, maybe, they will train to hunt us. No, I cried, that is impossible. No human being. What is the good of going on with such lies? Said the artilleryman. There is man who had been cheerful. What sense to pretend there isn't? And I succumbed to his conviction. If they come after me, he said, Lord, if they come after me, and subside in a grim meditation. I sat contemplating these things. I could find nothing to bring against this man's reasons. In the days before the invasion, no one would have questioned my intellectual superiority to this. I, a professed and recognized writer on philosophical themes, and he, a common soldier, and yet he had already formulated a situation that I had scarcely realized. What are you doing? I said presently. What plans have you made? He hesitated. Well, it is like this, he said. What have we to do? We have to invent a sort of life where man can live and breathe and be sufficiently secure to bring the children up. Yes, wait a bit. I will make it clear what I think ought to be done. The tame ones will go like all tame beasts. In few generations, they will be big, beautiful, rich-blooded, stupid rubbish. The risk is that we, who kept wild, will go savage, generated into a sort of big savage rat. You see, how I mean to live is underground. I have been thinking about the drains. Of course, those who don't know drains think horrible things, but under these Londons are miles and miles, hundreds of miles, and a few day rains, and London empty will leave them sweet and clean. The main drains are big enough and airy enough for anyone. Then there is cellars, vaults, stores, from which boating passages may be made to the drains, and the railway tunnels and subway. You began to see? And we form a band, able-bodied, clean-minded men. We are not going to pick up any rubbish that drift in. We clean go out again. As you meant me to go? Well, I parleyed, didn't I? We won't quarrel about that. Go on. Those who stop obey orders, able-bodied, clean-minded women, we want also mothers and teachers, no lackadaisical ladies, no blasted rolling eyes. We can't have any weak or silly. Life is real again, and the useless and cumbersome and mischievous have to die. They ought to die. They ought to be willing to die. It is a sort of disloyalty, after all, to live and taint the race, and they cannot be happy. Moreover, dying is not so dreadful. It is the funking makes it bad. And in all these places we shall gather. Our district will be London, and we may even be able to keep a watch and run about it in the open when the Martians keep away. Play cricket, perhaps? That's how we shall save the race. It is possible thing. But saving the race is nothing in itself. As I say, that's only being rats. It is saving our knowledge, and adding to it is the thing. These men like you come in. There is books, there is models. We must make great safe places down deep and get all the books we can. Not novels and poetry swipes, but ideas, science books. That is where men like you come in. We must go to the British Museum and pick all these books through. Especially, we must keep up our science, learn more. We must watch these Martians. Some of us must go as spies. When it is all working, perhaps I will get caught, And the great thing is, we must leave the Martians alone. We mustn't even steal. If we get in their ways, we clear out. We must show them we mean no harm. Yes, I know, but they're intelligent things, and they won't hurt us down if they have all they want and think we are just harmless vermin. The artilleryman paused and laid a brown hand upon my arm. After all, it may not be so much we may have to learn before. Just imagine 4 or 5 of their fighting machines suddenly starting off, hit right and left, and not a Martian in them, but men who have learned the way how. It may be in my time even, these men. Fancy having one of them lovely things with its hit ray wide and free. Fancy having it in control. What would it matter if you smashed the Smithers at the end of the run after a bust like that? I reckon the Martians will open their beautiful eyes. Can't you see them hurling, puffing and blowing and hooting to their other machines' affairs? Something out of gear in every case, and swish, bang, rattle, swish, just as they are fumbling over it Swish comes the heat ray, and behold, man has come back to his own. For a while, the imaginative daring of the artilleryman and the tone of assurance and courage he assumed completely dominated my mind. I believed unhesitatingly both on his forecast of human destiny and in the practicality of his astonishing scheme. And the reader who thinks me susceptible and foolish must contrast his position, reading steadily with all his thoughts about his subject, and mine crouching fearful in the bush and listening, distracted by apprehension. We talked in this manner though the early morning time, and later crept out of the bushes, and after scanning the sky for Martians, hurried precipitately to the house on Putney Hill, where he had made his lair. It was the coal cellar of the place, and when I saw the work he had spent a week upon, it was a burrow scarcely 10 yards long, which he designed to reach to the main drain on Putney Hill. I had my first inkling of the gulf between his dreams and his power. Such a hole I could have dug in a day, but I believed in him sufficiently to work with him all that morning until past midday at his digging. We had a garden barrow and shot the earth we removed against the kitchen range. We refreshed ourselves with a tin of mock turtle soup and wine from the neighboring pantry. I found a curious relief from the aching strangeness of the world in this steady labor. As we worked, I turned his project over my mind, and presently objections and doubts began to rise. But I worked there all the morning, so glad was I to find myself with a purpose again. After working an hour, I began to speculate on the distance one had to go before a clock was reached, and the chances we had of missing it altogether. My immediate trouble was why we should dig the long tunnel, when it was possible to get into the drain at once, down one of the manholes, and work back to the house. It seemed to me, too, that the house was inconvenient chosen and required a needless length of tunnel, and just I was beginning to face these things, the artilleryman stopped digging and looked at me. "We are working well," he said, and put down his spade. "Let us knock off a bit," he said. "I think it's time we reconstruct from the roof of the house." I was for going on, and after a little hesitation, he resumed his spade. And suddenly I was struck by a thought. I stopped, and so did he at once. "Why were you walking about the common?" I said, "but instead of being here?" "Taking the air," he said. "I was coming back. It is safer by night." "But the work?" "Oh, one can't always work," he said, and in a flash I saw the man plan. He hesitated, holding his spade. "We ought to reconstruct now," he said, "because if any come near, they may hear the spades and drops upon us unawares." I was no longer disposed to object. We went all together to the roof and stood on a ladder peeping out of the roof door. No Martians were to be seen, and we ventured out to the tails and slipped down under the shelter of the parapet. From this position, a strawberry hid the great portion of Putney, but we could see the river below, bubbling mass of red weed, and the low part of Lambeth, loaded and red. The red creepers swarmed up the trees about the old places, and their branches stretched gaunt and dead, and set with shriveled leaves from amid its cluster. It was strange how entirely dependent both these things were upon flowing water for their propagation. About us, neither had grain of footing. Lumbernard, pink may, snowballs, and trees of arborvitae rose out of the laurels and hydrogas, green and brilliant, into the sun. Beyond Kensington, dense smoke was rising, and a blue haze hid the northward hills. The artilleryman began to tell me of the sort of people who still remain in London. "One night last week," he said, "some fools got the electrical lights in the order, and there was Regent Street and Circus ablaze, crowded with painted and raged drunkards, men and women dancing and shouting till dawn. A man who was there told me, and as the day came, they became aware of the fighting machine standing near by the Langham, looking down at them. Heaven knows how long they had been there. It must have given some of them a nasty turn. He came down the road towards them and picked them up, nearly 100, too drunk or frightened to run away." Grotesque gleam of a time no history will ever fully describe. From that, in answer to my questions, he came around to his grandiose plan again. He grew enthusiastic. He talked so eloquent of the possibility of capturing a fighting machine that I more than half believed in him again. But now that I was beginning to understand something of his quality, I could divine the stress he laid on doing nothing precipitately, and I note that now there was no question that he personally was to capture and fight the great machine. After a time we went down to the cellar. Neither of us seemed to resume the digging, and when he suggested a meal, I was nothing loath. He became suddenly very generous, and when we had eaten, he went away and returned with some excellent cigars. We lit these, and his optimism glowed. He was inclined to regard my coming as a great occasion. "There is some champagne in the cellar," he said. "We can dig better on this Thames side Burgundy," I said. "No," he said, "I am a host today. Champagne! Great God, we have a heavy enough task before us. Let us take a rest and gather strength while we may. Look at these blustered hands." And pursuant to this idea of a holiday, he insisted upon playing cards after we had eaten. He taught me anchor, and after dividing London between us, I taking the northern side and he the southern, we played for parish points. Grotesque and foolish as this will seem to the sober reader, it is absolutely true, and what is more remarkable, I found the card games and several others we played extremely interesting. Strange mind of man, that, with our species upon the edge of extermination or appalling degradation, with no clear prospect before us, but the chance of horrible death, we could sit following the chance of this painted plasterboard and playing the joker with a vivid delight. Afterwards he taught me poker, and I beat him 3-doll chess games. When dark came, we decided to take the risk and lit a lamp. After an interminable string of games, we suppered, and the artilleryman finished the champagne. We went on smoking the cigar. He was no longer the energetic originator of his species I had encountered in the morning. He was still optimistic, but it was a less kinetic, a more thoughtful optimism. I remember he wound up with my health and proposed a speech of small variety and considerable intermittence. I took a cigar and went upstairs to look at the light of which we had spoken, that bizarre, so greenly along the Highgate hills. At first I stared unintelligently across the London valley. The northern hill was shrouded in darkness, and the fires near Kingston glowed redly, and now and then an orange-red tongue of flame flashed up and vanished in the deep blue night. All the rest of London was black. Then, nearer, I perceived a strange light, a pale, violet-purple fluorescent glow quivering under the night breeze. For a space I could not understand it, and then I knew that it must be the red wheat from which this faint radiation proceeded. With that realization, my dormant sense of wonder, my sense of proportion of things, awoke again. I glanced from that to Mars, red and clear, glowing high in the west, and gazed long and earnestly at the darkness of Hampstead and Highgate. I remained a very long time upon the roof, wondering at the grotesque change of the day. I recall my mental state from the midnight prayer to the foolish card laying. I had a violent revulsion of feelings. I remember I flung away the cigar with a certain wasteful symbolism. My folly came to me with glaring exaggeration. I seemed a traitor to my wife and to my kind. I was filled with remorse. I resolved to leave this strange, indisciplined dreamer of great things to his drink and gluttony, and to go on into London. There, it seemed to me, I had the best chance of learning what the Martians and my fellow men were doing. I was still upon the roof when the late moon rose.